Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts and ideas and hopefully some inspiration on how to build more adventure into your everyday life. I am really delighted today to welcome Rachel Forbes to the programme. So when I first had the idea of setting up this podcast, Rachel was one of the people right at the top of the list of who I wanted to speak to. And this is for a number of reasons. We first met probably just over 15 years ago. I'm going to say it's 15 years ago when we were competing for Army Snowboarding together. So I already knew she was pretty adventurous. But then last year she competed in a race across a frozen Mongolian lake, like 100-kilometer race. To me, that's probably next level adventurous, which I found inspiring in itself. But then the fact that she did it around a full-time job and being mum to 3 kids, that was amazing. And she's since gone on to take up wild swimming. She's been swimming all through the winter in a marine lake with her mum. Really amazing just seeing some of the things she's been up to. And part of that has been her concept, which she posts about quite frequently, around finding time and how, as a busy working parent, you can still find time for the little adventures as much as the really big ones too. And I guess given that this is a podcast about everyday adventures, that's something that I really wanted to explore with her today. So I guess my first question has got to be asked, what was it that made you decide that you were going to run 100 kilometers across a frozen lake in Mongolia?
It was slightly an accident. I was in the hamster wheel, like so many others. I went to school, I went to university, I got a full-time job in the army where I met you. I got married, I had kids, I got divorced, I had another child. I carried on working full-time and just life was just rolling on. And I went to a really amazing evening where female adventurers were speaking. And I sat and I thought, I'm surrounded by people who are really my tribe, and I'm absolutely blown away by the different things some of these people have done. And this is what I want to do. And I miss that part of me. So after that, I just went away and started to think about it. And I joined an online forum called Adventure Queens, which I think you're on as well. And on there one day, I'm sat on a train, some ungodly hour of the morning, surrounded by papers I was meant to be reading for a meeting. And I saw this post on Adventure Queens and it said, come and join us. We're going to run 100 miles across a frozen lake in Mongolia. Direct message me if you want to learn more. So without checking with my boyfriend, long-suffering boyfriend, or anybody else, I sent off a DM and I thought I will never hear back because probably loads of people will have replied and be interested. And a week later, I found myself in a pub talking to Ali Bailey about her experience when she test piloted the race the year before. And I was completely captured. We spoke for about an hour and a half. And 2 things she said to me that really, really got me. The first was one night I was so cold I thought I was going to die. So I thought, this is good. This ticks the adventure box. And she said it had been a life-changing experience. And I thought, well, that's kind of where I am. I need to change my life. I want to change. It was bigger than I thought. I started looking at trail half marathons. So it was a slight graduation from there. Yeah, I got swept away with it. And suddenly I was on the phone to the race director who was asking me questions like, how many ultra marathons have you done? I haven't done any. I hadn't run a marathon. I hadn't run a half marathon knowingly, but I was managing the occasional part run when the boys didn't have a match. So yeah, I suddenly found myself needing to train and prepare for a race. And I signed up in November and the race was in March. So it was pretty rapid and flew in the face of advice of all of my ultramarathon friends who thought I was bonkers.
Gosh, you know what I love is the fact that the thing that inspired you is probably the thing that would put most people off.
I think it was just brutal honesty. And I thought, hey, that sounds really cool.
It's that thing of that commitment of going, actually, if I really want to do this, if I really want to change my life, maybe there's something about doing it so wholeheartedly that means I can't step back from that.
It seemed like an amazing opportunity. It was something that, it was the inaugural race, so it hadn't been done unless for the test pilots the year before. And I just thought it sounds exciting. It sounds just what I need to kind of get myself back into that groove. And it was a massive adventure and it was amazing. But it's how that then set up for those smaller adventures and the being away less time and the more reality adventures really was what changed me.
That's really interesting. So actually, yeah, the experience of the adventure was incredible, but that's what then followed was the biggest change. So given that you've mentioned some of the challenges around a very short time frame and never having done an ultramarathon before, but what was either the biggest challenge when you were taking part in the race or leading up to it? What was the thing that you found most difficult about it?
think that it was probably in the lead up, really. I signed up to it by myself, and I had set myself the challenge of going alone, not going with somebody else. And that was quite difficult, but really it was about the preparation. And I knew that I had to prepare mentally, because normally when you're in a marathon, there's hundreds of thousands of people there. You're running with other people all the time. And I knew I'd be spending huge chunks of time in the middle of nowhere, completely alone. The physical preparation obviously was quite challenging. And at the time I was training right in the middle of winter, 5 o'clock in the morning is a pretty dark and lonely place to be running with a head torch. And I normally run off road, but obviously I couldn't at that time of day. So that was quite hard, getting out of bed when it was windy and cold. But the motivation for that was, I was thinking, well, when I'm in bed in my gear with the 8 other competitors that I'm sharing a gear with, and I'm stiff and it's minus 40 and I've got to get up, am I going to regret not getting out of bed and going for this training run? Clearly the answer was always yes. So I think that was the hardest thing, was that the motivation and preparing for something that not many other people have done. So you go online and there's not a huge amount of research about what you can eat and how different foods behave at minus 40, and how to hydrate yourself, and all of the things around the sort of admin side were quite challenging.
Wow. Just to have all of those things to deal with, let alone getting up at 5 a.m. to go for a run, that's immense. And you've talked a bit, I think you've alluded to it already. Obviously, the experience must have been incredible. And having seen some of your photos, it just looks absolutely breathtaking. I'm sure it probably wasn't lots of stopping and looking at the scenery.
No, it really was. When you're running along the lake, you had one side was sort of rolling hills and the other side was really craggy mountains. And then it was just nothing. There was no birds, there was no noise. There is just nothing. And it's just completely mind-blowing and very spiritual. And you hear the ice cracking under your feet. It sends out these sort of tiny fissures. And it's just, I feel so privileged to have had that experience. And we were very much with the Mongolians as well. They looked after us. They were our safety team. They had horse-pulled sleds looking after us, and they cut the water out of the lake with a chainsaw and melted it for us to drink. And we really lived cheek by jowl with them during the race, and that was really special as well. It wasn't like we just turned up and were doing a race on their turf. We were very much doing it as a team. We couldn't have survived without them. So it was a really very, very, very beautiful place, and I feel hugely privileged to have been shared that.
Gosh, well, I've seen the photos. It did look incredible. I just, I wonder that thing about, the minute you say you can hear the ice cracking under your feet. Were there moments when you felt sort of genuinely scared?
I think the 2 times I felt most scared, firstly, were when I got dropped off at the airport and I thought, what am I doing? And I started to meet the rest of the crew, who were all amazing, and the camaraderie was incredible. But they were also talking about when they'd done Marathon des Sables, when they'd done an Arctic expedition. And I was thinking, I am in the wrong place here. So I am really bluffing above my scale. The other time was just before the start of the race, and we stood on the ice. We'd had a sort of run out on the ice the day before and tried out our ice spikes and things. And just that reality of, this is it, we're going to start. The adrenaline was seriously pumping. But no, out on the ice, I did feel safe. It was, obviously I let out some girly shrieks when the ice cracked underneath for the first few hours.
It's probably justifiable, yeah.
But it was just mind-blowing. It's really difficult to describe. It was so, so beautiful, and it was always changing. Yeah, it was stunning.
And you said right at the start that whilst it was an incredible experience, that in a way the life-changing bit was partly doing it, but was also what then followed. And we've touched a little bit on your finding time idea and how you've sort of taken that forward. At what point did things change? When did you sort of think that this is a big moment, or was it gradual?
It was really funny. I obviously had many hours running along the frozen lake by myself. And I slightly was waiting for this sort of streak of lightning to hit me and change my life. I really thought I was going to have this massive epiphany and this clarity about how I was going to live the rest of my life. And it never happened. And I remember at the end thinking, well, that was a bit disappointing. Not the race was amazing, but I thought, I didn't have this life-changing moment. My brain didn't have this event that I was expecting it to have. It took a few days, and I slowly started to realise that what I'd done was I totally changed my mentality. Whereas before I would have said, oh, well, I can't go to the gym today because my train was running late, or I've got an early train, or I've got to pick up the boys, or there's hockey training. And there was always an I can't because. And I'd really managed to change that to thinking, well, how can I? So can I do kettlebells or yoga on the living room floor while my 3-year-old crawls around? And obviously you've got to avoid him with a kettlebell. But apart from that, yes, you can. Can I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go for a run? Well, as long as there's someone else in the house, yes, I can. And I was challenging myself to think, well, if I say I haven't got time, how much time have I spent on my phone today? that I could have actually gone and done those things. And it doesn't have to be a 1, 2, 3 hour run. It can literally be 10, 20 minutes of yoga on the living room floor. And it's not the most mindful and peaceful experience when you've got kids running around, but there is all this opportunity. And it was just changing my mindset to believe that I could do it, and the self-belief as well, that actually it's really important. I learned that doing it made me a nicer person and a better person, and I got that self-belief back. And by me being stronger and believing in myself, I think that's a great lesson and a great impact on my children as well.
That's so interesting, isn't it? It's that, yeah, the more that your confidence was built as a result of doing it, that has a direct impact back on. Because I think one of the biggest barriers that they experience is not that they find it difficult to find the time, but to justify taking that time when there's so many other things that they feel that they should be doing, and that they become barriers. But like you said, actually, when you do take that time for yourself, that feeds back into the family as well. That feeds back into how you're feeling about yourself and actually how you're interacting with others.
I think parental guilt is a huge thing. And then when you realise that you could run up to a hockey match and then watch it and then run home, or you could in fact run laps around it, because otherwise I probably would have been just chatting to some of the other mums and still missed the goal. So it was just trying to work out, actually you can do all these things, or the children can cycle while you run. There's always a way around it. But I have to say that a huge part of it for me as well is I do have a boyfriend and my parents who are massively supportive and help out, and I couldn't have done it without them as well.
Yeah. And so how important that support is, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that if you've got that, then find a way to give yourself permission, in a way to go, it's all right that I do this. It's important that I do this.
Yeah.
So I know that certainly over the last winter, you've got quite heavily into wild swimming, and I've seen so many beautiful photos of you out in marine lakes and looking quite cold afterwards, as we said, justifiably. But had you swum before? Why did you decide to go down that path?
I've always been a swimmer. I swam in the pool competitively as a child, but it was my mum, who's about to turn 70, and she grew up down in Whitstable sailing and swimming, and whenever we visited my grandparents, they would bribe us with ice cream to swim between the groins. And on the way up in the car, I remember we always made, Mum, do we really have to do this? And Mum had been talking about swimming through the winter, and we'd seen on Facebook various pictures of these ladies swimming in their costumes through the winter. And Mum was very ill last year, and when she came through that, she said, right, we're doing it. She said, but actually, can you come with me and support me? Because she's now type 1 diabetic. So she said, can you come with me? You don't have to get in, but I just really need your support. And I thought, how can I sit on the side and watch my mum do this? So I thought, well, I'm going to have to get in and do it as well. And we started with a lovely coach who really helped, and a group of fabulously mental ladies and their cake afterwards. And that was it. I mean, it has turned into an obsession. I was utterly addicted to it. The feeling that getting into really cold water gives you is just, it's nothing like I'd felt when I'd surfed in the winter before, covered head to toe in neoprene. The buzz of swimming in a swimsuit in cold water is like nothing else I've ever had. And I started off swimming once a week, and then it came twice a week. And it's literally, if anyone texts me or messages me, say, oh, I'm going to the lake, can you get there? I will move hell and high water to get there, and drag the kids down or do anything, because it's just amazing. And I'm lucky because I've got somewhere I can do it that's not very far from home. But yeah, I was down there at 6 o'clock this morning because I wanted to be there, and it was beautiful. And I was home before anyone else woke up, so no one even knew I'd gone.
Gosh. Yeah, that thing of actually starting off, not necessarily because you decided, right, that's what I'm going to be doing, but in support of somebody else.
Oh, I didn't want to do it. No. I'm petrified. I don't like cold water. I don't like water when I can't see what's underneath me. I don't like water when I can see what's underneath me. Quite happy in a pool. And the marine lake is fed by the estuary, and it's quite murky and brown. So it was not at all something I wanted to do. Not in a million years. And it's just bizarre because now I completely love it.
That's incredible. And I think it's sometimes when you get started on something and you don't, like you said, you might not even want to do it, or you don't know where it's going to go. And just by the sort of act of getting started, that you start to find that you're really enjoying something, and it develops from there, and that you've taken it forward. I mean,
it's the most amazing camaraderie as well. That when you go down, it's an amazing group of really non-judgmental people. It's body positive. It doesn't matter whether you're head to toe neoprene or you're in a swimsuit. It doesn't matter whether you're in there for an hour and a half or 4 minutes, or you just dip. It doesn't matter if you're in the lake or the sea. I mean, I've been away for work and gone and stayed in a hotel for a few days, and I've connected with people locally on Facebook swimming in their local sea or wherever it might be, just been met with open arms, obviously pre-COVID, open arms, and said, yeah, come and swim with us. It's just been completely eye-opening from that side. So there's the mental benefit, I get this huge buzz, but there's also this amazing camaraderie.
Yeah, and that's something I know, certainly, Liz, who I spoke to in one of the previous episodes, that she talks about as well, just that sense of community. In a way, not necessarily knowing that that's what you're looking for, but then finding it and realizing how important that is, or what that brings alongside the activity itself. And I think particularly when you're doing something that not necessarily a lot of other people do, I can imagine that maybe that bond or those relationships form much more quickly and probably have a greater depth to them in some ways, because you're all sort of experiencing something quite unique. So I know that you've got some adventures planned coming up, or you certainly did, whether or not they've been put on hold at the moment, like so many of ours. But I think you've got something coming up around wild swimming. Do you want to say a bit more about it?
I signed up for a swim in the Arctic Circle, which I'm really excited about, which has been postponed till next year. And it's in a river that's between Sweden and Finland. And yes, that's really exciting. There's a swim at midday and then another one at midnight. So I can't wait for that next year. I've signed up for the wide swim. I think that's 7K with some friends. And then with Rat Race, who's the company that I went to Mongolia with, I'm doing a test pilot for them in another cold place that I'm not really meant to talk about, but that will be that's being postponed again till next year. So some exciting adventures coming up next year. And then in the meantime, just trying to squeeze in all those kind of little close by adventures and just like you with the podcast, doing things with the kids, taking the kids out for night camping or camping in the garden, going walking, cycling, just being outdoors and taking time just to breathe deeply.
So if somebody, for example, did think that they might want to run across a frozen lake or take up wild swimming, or I think coming back to that point about finding a way to find more time, I mean, what's the one piece of advice that you might give them?
So for me, I think it's really important to set a goal. It doesn't have to be huge, but if I'm going to do something once a week, or I'm going to swim through the winter, so set a goal that then gives you something to aim for. Prepare for it, absolutely, whether that's physically, mentally, whatever you need to do. And then the most important thing, I think, is believe in yourself, because we're all capable of so much more than we think. We don't give ourselves enough credit. So if you believe in yourself, I really think you can achieve it. And you don't have to be first, you don't have to be the fastest. All of those things don't matter. It's just something for you that will make you just smile and think, yeah, I did it.
That's so wonderful. Thanks so much, Rachel. I could talk for hours about this, and there's so many more questions I'd like to ask. If people do want to know more, find out more about your race or your adventures coming up, where can they find you?
Someone's on Instagram, and that's Rachel is Finding Time. That's the easiest place to find me.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I hope to catch up very soon. Take care.
It's really nice to see you. Thank you.
Bye. So I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Rachel and were left feeling as absolutely inspired as I was. There were a couple of things that really stood out for me from our conversation. I think the first was around that thing of self-belief, that actually the more that you stick yourself outside of your comfort zone, the more that comes back to you in a way in terms of your increasing confidence and self-belief. And that's something that stays with you and that you can take back into different aspects of your life. And the other thing that really struck me was just the sheer joy in her voice when she's talking about wild swimming and getting into the marine lake and going for those swims, and how energized that left her feeling, how much joy it brings to her. And it just makes me think actually how important that is, to find something that truly brings you joy, that just lights you up when you do it, even if you do it imperfectly. And I know for me that's often particularly around surfing, but I don't seem to get any better, or I might seem to get worse on the occasions that I manage to get in the water. But every time I come out, I've got this huge smile on my face and I just feel this buzz, and I'm so glad I did it. And it was, for me, it was just listening to Rachel talk about that the energy it gives back to her, and how finding time no longer becomes such a challenge because actually you're doing something that you really love. So I hope that's inspired you to either go and do the thing that you really love, think about the thing you really love, or seek it out. I would love to know what you thought of the programme. So Please feel free to leave me a review or get in touch and let me know your thoughts. If you enjoy the podcast, please do subscribe. We'll be back again next Wednesday with another podcast and look forward to seeing you there. Speak to you soon. Bye.